Hi, I'm Reverend Dave Christensen, Director and Lead Investigator for Phantasm Paranormal. I've had a lot of people ask me what got me into the paranormal. The story's kind of long, but it's kind of interesting too. I was in the Army, Special Forces, for a total of 13 years, and I came home on leave one time. And I was hanging out with a buddy at his place. We were sitting on the front porch when a car broke down in front of his house. Well, I saw this girl in the car, and the girl was good looking. And I decided I was going to go out and help the guy get his car started. Well, I was mainly interested in the girl, really. So I went out there, and we're talking to the guy, and I start talking to the girl, and the girl had a real attitude. I mean, she was being a bitch. I mean, just, she was just crabbier than all get out. And I was trying to be nice to her, just, kind of turning on the charm and stuff. Finally, we got the car started. They left, and my buddy and I went back up to the porch, and I told him, I said, I'm going to get that girl. And he laughed at me. He said, no, she's not a bit interested in you. You don't have a chance with her. Well, I went back over to my buddy's house the next day, and when I got out of my car, I noticed her down the hill. So I shouted down the hill at her and said, hey, come on up here. I want to talk to you. And she stopped her bike and said, you talking to me? I said, yeah, come on up here. I want to talk to you. He says, well, what do you say? What? I don't know. I said, will you please come up here and talk to me? And she got on her bike and she came up. Well, we went over and sat down in the park and we were talking, and I asked her what her name was. That it was Debbie Bouquet. I said, wow, I used to go to school with a kid named Jim Bouquet. She said, yeah, that was my big brother. Debbie Bouquet, and I remembered her then. She was a skinny, scrawny little thing. She had tear-shaped glasses with sparkles in them. She had long, straight hair. She was as skinny as a rail. And I just didn't have any interest in her. Okay, but now, oh man, she was good looking. And we went on to talking and stuff, and she started telling me about this guy that was living with her. His name was Mickey, and he was abusive to her and her two kids. She had two kids, Michael and Melissa. I said, well, if you want to get rid of him, I can help you. I can stay at your place, and get rid of him for you. And she, I don't know, ho hum. And I said, well, I'll give you my phone number if you change your mind. Just give me a call. Well, later on that night, the phone rang, and it was Debbie. And she talked to her big brother, Jimmy, and Jimmy said, yeah, Dave's a good guy. You'll be safe with him. He won't bother you. And she said, can you come over to my place? Yeah, I'll be over. So I went over to her place, and we were in the kitchen talking, and the kids were in the other room playing. And Mickey came home that night, probably pretty close to around 11 o'clock. And he walked in the door, and he was about half drunk. And he asked, who the hell are you? I said, I'm your worst nightmare. And then he started pushing my buttons, he started using all kinds of language. And well, make a long story short, we got into it, and I threw him off the balcony. Well, he was gone. Next day I got up and started down the stairs to go somewhere. And the guy that lived in the apartment below her, it was an old house, apartment upstairs, apartment downstairs. And the guy in the apartment downstairs said that he saw Mickey crawl under the porch the night before, and he slept underneath the porch, and he wanted to know what was going on. So I told him what was going on, and he laughed, and he said, good, about time somebody got rid of this guy. So I called a friend of mine in the reserves, and I asked him if he had any barbed wire. What I was going to do is I was going to string barbed wire across the opening underneath the porch, so when Mickey tried to crawl back in there that night, he'd get caught up in some barbed wire. And he said, well, I don't have any barbed wire, but I do got a short piece of concertina wire. I said, that'll work. So I went and picked that up, and I strung it underneath the porch, in front of the opening of the porch. And later on that night, Mickey came back, and he didn't stay very long. But I ended up staying with Debbie for 28 days. And like the fourth or fifth day I was there, she said, you don't have to sleep on the couch. You can come sleep with me. Well, my male instincts kicked in, but then I got to be a gentleman. I'm a gentleman above anything else. So Debbie and I were together for about 28 days, and then I had to go back to Germany. And I called her once a week, every week, for, a month and a half, 2 months. And then I started calling her twice a week. And one day my commander called me into his office, and I went in there, and his wife was in there. She was sitting in a chair by the door. And my commander says, Sergeant, what has gotten into you? Ever since you got back from leave, your head's been up your butt. You've been up in the clouds. What's going on? What happened while you were home on leave? So I told him the story about Debbie. And the commander's wife started laughing. And I turned around and I looked at her, and she looked at me. She says, Sergeant, you're in love. And I said, no, I'm not. No, that's not going to happen, because all my friends in the Army that were married and everything else, they had nothing but problems with their marriage, because when we got called up, we had to go. We couldn't tell them where we were going or when we were going to be back. We just had to grab our stuff and go. And I didn't want that kind of stuff in my life, And I called Debbie the next day. Excuse me. I called Debbie the next day, and I would talk to her and everything. And it went on for about another month and a half, and I thought about what the commander's wife said. I thought about it a lot, and I finally realized that she was right. I was in love with this girl. And I called Debbie on the phone one night, and I was talking to her, and I said, what would you say if I asked you to marry me? She says something like, well, are you asking me to marry you? Real attitude, but that's the way she was. She had an attitude. She was a tough girl. I said, well, I suppose I am. She said, well, then ask me. I said, will you marry me? She goes, yes. And I was surprised, And I got off the phone with her, and I called my mom, and I said, Mom, I'm getting married. My mom said, don't you lie to your mother. I said, no, Mom, seriously, I'm getting married. Her name's Debbie. I gave her my phone number, and she goes, don't you lie to me. I said, Mom, call her. Well, I got off the phone with my mom, and she called Debbie, and they made all the arrangements and everything else. My mom has been after me to get married since I was 20 years old. And here I am now, 33 years old, calling her up and saying, Mom, I'm getting married. My mom thought I was lying to her. Well, they made all the arrangements and everything. I talked to my commander, and he made sure that I got home, so I could get married, but he could only give me a few days. I went home and I got married. And this is my Debbie, the day we got married. That is the woman that I was so deeply, madly in love with. Actually, the first woman I actually ever loved, you know. And we got married. Debbie and I had 2 more kids, and 7 years after we got married, my wife Debbie died one night. She died from a massive heart attack. And she was a skinny little thing. She was very active, and it just floored me what happened. Here I was, a single dad now with 4 kids, And I wanted to know if I'd ever see her again. I was born and raised and told that, when you die, you're reunited with your loved ones, And if you're married, you'll be reunited with your husband or your wife and da-da-da. And I heard all that stuff before. But I'm one of those people that I need proof. Okay, you can't tell me something I'm going to buy into it. I need physical proof, okay? So I went out and I bought a 35 millimeter camera, a tape recorder, and an EMF meter. And I started to see this girl. Her name was Leslie Shapper. I called her one night and I asked her if she wanted to go somewhere with me. And she said, yeah, okay. So I went over and I picked her up and we went to this cemetery called Ball Cemetery. It's located in Sarpy County. And it is one of the most haunted places in Nebraska. Okay? We went out there, and I'm not going to tell you everything that happened while we were out there. I'll tell you about that some other time. But we took all kinds of pictures and audio recordings and everything else. And when we got done there, we took the film into Walmart, Bellevue, at the 1 hour photo thing there. And they developed the pictures for me. And when I got the pictures back, I couldn't believe what we saw in the pictures. We saw orbs. We saw ectoplasm like you wouldn't believe. We even had a picture of what looked like a lightning bolt coming out of a tree. And I listened to the audio, and there was all kinds of voices on the audio, not just mine and Leslie's, but there was other men and other women as well, and you could hear them as clear as a bell. So that's what got me started into that, and I told my friends and my relatives and stuff about it, and one night I got a phone call from this one gal. She was a friend of my sister's. She lived in a mobile home. She had a little boy that was seeing a man in the bathtub, in the bathroom, and he was afraid to go in there by himself. She also told me she was hearing doors open and closing and lights going on and off and all kinds of other paranormal stuff. And she wanted to know if I would come and check it out. Well, if you want to read the full story about that, it's towards the bottom of the page. It's called The Man in the Tub. And come to find out, the spirit of this man wanted us to let his daughter know that he didn't commit suicide, because when he died, they classified it as he committed suicide, but he didn't. It was an accident. He went out drinking with some of his friends, and he took his heart medication while he was out drinking. Well, when he got home, he took it again before he got into the tub, and he overdosed on his medication, and it killed him. And his daughter was convinced that he committed suicide, and he wanted her to know that he didn't, that it was just an accident. And well, you can read about the rest of the story at the bottom of the page, but that's how I got started. And we investigate all kinds of things. We investigate suicides, which a couple that we investigated ended up not being suicides, but they ended up being homicides. We investigated a few homicides, accidental deaths. We also investigate historic locations and landmarks, abandoned buildings of all types at all places, and actual ghost towns. We do businesses, homes, and apartments as well, but we don't do them as frequent as we used to. We're more into the abandoned stuff and historical stuff. But some of the places that we have investigated is Wounded Knee at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota, Little Bighorn near Crow Agency in Montana, Devil's Tower near Bear Lodge Range District of the Black Hills, Donner's Pass in Sierra Nevada, 9 miles west of Truckee, California, the Villisca Axe Murder House. We used to be known as Paranormal Investigations, and we were the very first to investigate the Villisca Axe Murder House. And where else? Oh, Hamilton City, or Miner's Delight. It's a ghost town in Wyoming. Fantastic place, fantastic. And very, very haunted. Ball Cemetery in Nebraska. Blackbird Hill in Nebraska. Mormon Cemetery in Omaha, Nebraska. And that is a fascinating place as well. That's a great place for pictures and EVPs. Pottersfield in Nebraska. That's kind of a sad place, but you get all kinds of evidence there as well. But there's a lot of other places that have investigated, and we can't publish anything about those investigations. As a matter of fact, some of the places that we have investigated, they don't want us to even mention them as being haunted places. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you later.
Sleep well.